It was supposed to be a quiet family evening inside the palace. No cameras, no staff whispers, just the future king and his children behind closed doors. But in the middle of that silence, young Prince Louie asked a question that no one in the royal family expected to hear. A question so innocent yet so explosive that it would send shockwaves through the monarchy. "Does this mean we never see Camilla again?" The room froze. And then Prince William answered with a single word that changed everything. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Inside the royal household, moments like this rarely happen without warning. Conversations usually unfold carefully, protected by layers of protocol and tradition. Yet on that particular evening, something had shifted. The palace corridors had been unusually quiet throughout the day, and even the staff sensed that the atmosphere among the senior royals had grown tense. William had spent much of the afternoon in private discussions, the kind that rarely appeared on official schedules. By the time he returned to his children, there was a heaviness in his voice that Catherine noticed immediately. She did not interrupt him. She simply watched, understanding that some conversations inside the royal family carried consequences far beyond the walls of the palace. Prince Louis had not intended to step into the middle of that tension. Like any child, he had simply been listening. Earlier in the day, he had overheard fragments of adult voices drifting through hallways. Conversations cut short when footsteps approached, names spoken carefully, and then quickly replaced by silence. The name Camilla surfaced more than once. Louis did not understand the complicated politics behind those whispers. But he understood enough to know that something was changing. When children notice the adults around them acting differently, curiosity grows quickly, and Louis carried that quiet curiosity into the room where his father and mother were speaking. William sensed it the moment Louis walked in. There was a seriousness in the boy's expression that did not belong to a child his age. Catherine noticed it too, her eyes briefly meeting William's as if silently asking the same question. What had Louis heard? But the moment passed before either of them could say anything, because Louis spoke first. His voice was calm, almost hesitant, yet the words carried a weight that neither parent could ignore. "Does this mean we never see Camilla again?" he asked, the innocence in his tone clashing sharply with the gravity of the question itself. For a second, William said nothing. The future King of Britain, a man trained to navigate the pressures of monarchy and history, found himself standing in the most unexpected confrontation of all, not with political advisors or public critics, but with the simple honesty of his own son. He could have avoided the question. Royal tradition often depended on carefully worded answers, gentle diversions that protected the children from complicated truths. Yet in that moment, William understood that Louis had already sensed the shift within the family. Avoiding the truth would only deepen the confusion. Catherine watched closely, saying nothing, but her presence carried quiet strength. She knew the emotional burden William was carrying, the private struggle that had been building behind the scenes for weeks. Protecting their children had always been a priority for both of them. But protecting them did not always mean shielding them from reality. Sometimes it meant facing the truth together as a family, even when that truth felt uncomfortable. William finally looked down at Louis, his voice steady but softer than usual. There was no anger, no hesitation, just a calm acceptance of what the moment required. "Yes," he said. The word hung in the air longer than anyone expected. Louis did not immediately respond. Instead, he looked between his parents, searching their faces for reassurance, trying to understand the meaning behind a decision that seemed bigger than he could fully grasp. Catherine gently placed a hand on his shoulder, a quiet gesture meant to steady the moment. William remained still, aware that the single word he had spoken carried more weight than Louis could possibly realize. Because within that quiet family exchange, something profound had just been acknowledged. The dynamic of the royal family had shifted, and even the youngest member of the household had felt the ripple of that change. The palace might continue presenting unity to the outside world, but inside these walls the reality was far more complicated. The silence that followed William's answer was not simply about Camilla. It was about loyalty, history, and the fragile balance between tradition and the future. And as the family sat together in that quiet room, processing a moment none of them had expected, One truth became impossible to ignore. The question Louie had asked was far bigger than it seemed. But the real question was never just about a child's innocence. It was about the storm inside the royal family that led to that moment. For months, something inside the royal household had been shifting. Conversations grew quieter when certain names were mentioned. Invitations changed. Family gatherings felt incomplete. The public saw smiles, but behind palace doors a silent divide was forming, one that stretched across generations of the monarchy. And at the center of it all was a question no royal aide dared to ask aloud. Had Camilla's place in the family finally reached its breaking point? Long before Prince Louis asked the question that stunned his parents, the atmosphere inside the palace had already begun to change. It happened slowly at first, so slowly that outsiders would never have noticed. Royal traditions continued, ceremonies proceeded as planned, and official statements maintained the careful language of unity. Yet beneath that polished surface, subtle adjustments were taking place. Conversations between senior royals became shorter. Meetings were rearranged. Certain discussions happened behind doors that remained firmly closed to everyone except the most trusted members of the inner circle. Within the palace staff, the shift was impossible to ignore. Royal aides are trained to observe quietly, to notice details others overlook, and many of them began recognizing patterns that did not exist before. Seating arrangements at family gatherings changed in ways that seemed minor on the surface, but carried deeper meaning for those familiar with royal protocol. Invitations to certain private events became more selective. Names that once appeared routinely on guest lists slowly disappeared. None of these changes were dramatic on their own, but together they created a growing sense that something significant was unfolding behind the scenes. At the center of this quiet transformation stood Prince William. As the future king, his influence inside the monarchy had been increasing steadily, and with that influence came difficult choices about the direction the royal family would take in the years ahead. William had always been aware that his generation represented a turning point for the monarchy. The traditions of the past carried immense weight, but the expectations of the future demanded a different kind of leadership. Balancing those forces was never going to be easy, and lately the pressure surrounding that balance had become impossible to ignore. Catherine felt that pressure as well, though her role in these conversations often remained unspoken. Those closest to the royal couple understood that her instincts centered firmly on protecting their children. The world outside the palace could be relentless, filled with speculation and scrutiny, and Catherine had always believed that the next generation of royals deserved as much stability as possible. That belief quietly influenced many of the discussions happening behind palace doors, particularly when the topic of family dynamics entered the conversation. Meanwhile, the broader royal household continued its daily routines, though an undercurrent of uncertainty lingered among those who worked closely with the family. Staff members noticed how certain names caused conversations to pause, how advisors exchanged cautious glances when discussions turned toward the future of the monarchy. No one spoke openly about what these signs meant, but the sense of anticipation grew stronger with each passing week. It was as if everyone inside the palace understood that a decision was approaching, even if they could not yet see its full shape. And within the private conversations between William and those closest to him, a deeper question was beginning to take form, one that touched not only on family relationships, but on the identity of the monarchy itself. The royal institution had always depended on unity, yet unity required difficult boundaries when personal tensions began threatening the stability of the whole. What made the situation even more complicated was that this conflict was never meant to become public knowledge. The monarchy survives on controlled narratives, carefully managed appearances that reassure the world everything remains steady. But inside the palace, the reality was far more fragile. Generational expectations clashed with long-standing traditions, and the emotional weight of family history pressed heavily on every decision being considered. By the time young Prince Louis overheard the fragments of conversation that would eventually lead him to ask his question, the storm inside the royal household had already been building for months. The smiles presented to the public were real, but they no longer told the whole story. Something fundamental inside the family was shifting, and those closest to the heart of the monarchy knew that the moment of reckoning was drawing closer. But what truly ignited the tension was not a public scandal. It was a deeply personal conflict inside the royal bloodline. For years, Prince William had carried the weight of the monarchy's future on his shoulders. Every decision, every silence, every carefully measured public smile hid a deeper struggle, one that few truly understood. Because behind the calm exterior of the future king, a quiet boundary had been forming. And when that boundary was finally crossed, William made a decision that would permanently reshape the royal family's inner circle. The pressure had not arrived suddenly. It had grown year by year, moment by moment, as William stepped deeper into the role history had prepared for him since childhood. Being the heir to the throne meant far more than standing beside tradition. It meant absorbing the emotional storms that came with it. Every royal crisis, every family disagreement, every public expectation slowly accumulated on his shoulders. To the world, he appeared composed, disciplined, steady. But inside the palace, those closest to him understood that the responsibility of safeguarding the monarchy often demanded choices that carried painful personal consequences. What made the situation even more complicated was that William was no longer just a prince navigating royal politics. He was a father. That reality reshaped the way he saw everything around him. The palace that once represented duty and legacy had now become the environment in which his children were growing up. Every whispered argument, every tense gathering, every quiet divide between family members threatened to echo into their lives. William understood the cost of growing up within the monarchy better than anyone. He had lived it. He had seen how public pressure could fracture relationships and how private struggles could become public spectacle. And because of that history, one determination had quietly taken root inside him. His children would not carry the same emotional burdens he once did. That determination became the foundation of countless private conversations between William and Catherine. Behind closed doors, away from advisors and royal protocol, they spoke honestly about the environment they wanted for their family. Catherine's voice in those moments was calm but unwavering. She had entered the royal world as an outsider, and that perspective allowed her to see its complexities with unusual clarity. She understood the value of tradition, but she also understood the emotional risks that came with allowing unresolved tensions to linger within a family constantly watched by the world. The deeper those conversations went, the clearer one truth became. Some boundaries had to be drawn. Not publicly, not dramatically, but firmly enough to protect the next generation from conflicts that belonged to the past. Yet setting those boundaries was far from simple. The royal family was built upon decades of relationships, alliances, and traditions that could not be adjusted without consequence. Any decision William made would ripple through the monarchy in ways no one could fully predict. Still, there comes a moment in every leader's journey when hesitation gives way to certainty. For William, that moment arrived quietly. There was no public announcement, no dramatic confrontation, no official declaration echoing through palace corridors. Instead, it emerged from a series of conversations, realizations, and emotional reckonings that slowly led him to the same unavoidable conclusion. Protecting the future sometimes required confronting the past. When William finally reached that point, the decision itself was surprisingly simple. What followed, however, was anything but simple. The shift began subtly, almost invisibly. Invitations changed. Conversations took on new direction. Advisors noticed that William's tone carried a new level of finality when discussing certain matters. The future king had drawn a line, and though he spoke about it calmly, those around him understood the significance immediately. Inside the royal household, the atmosphere adjusted almost overnight. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. Staff members sensed the shift in authority. Advisors recognized that William's leadership style was beginning to define the monarchy's next chapter. And within the family itself, relationships began reorganizing around the boundaries he had quietly established. But decisions made within the walls of the palace rarely remain contained there. Every change inside the royal household eventually touches the lives of those closest to it. And as William's choice slowly reshaped the family dynamic, the ripple effects began reaching places he had not fully anticipated. Yet William's decision would ripple far beyond palace corridors, reaching even the youngest members of the royal family. Children hear more than adults realize. They notice pauses, whispers, and the tension that hangs in the air long after a conversation ends. And on that particular evening inside the palace, Prince Louie heard just enough to piece together a question that no one expected him to ask. A question so simple, yet so devastating. Inside the royal household, conversations rarely unfold openly. Words are measured. Voices lower themselves the moment footsteps approach. Doors close gently but firmly. For adults, these habits become routine, a natural part of life within the monarchy. But for a child, those subtle shifts carry a different meaning. They signal mystery, they spark curiosity, and sometimes they reveal far more than anyone intends. Prince Louie had been noticing the change for days. Family gatherings that once felt lively now carried a strange absence. Certain names were no longer spoken casually. Even the rhythm of everyday palace life felt different, though no one had explained why. At dinner, there were pauses in conversations that adults tried to disguise with polite smiles. In hallways, voices stopped mid-sentence when children appeared. None of it made complete sense to Louie, but he understood enough to realize that something inside the family had shifted. Earlier that day, his curiosity had quietly pulled him toward a corridor where the voices of adults drifted through a half-closed door. He did not intend to listen, yet fragments of conversation reached him before he could walk away. Words like decision, future, and family boundaries floated through the air. And then one name surfaced more clearly than the others: Camilla. The tone surrounding that name was not angry, but it carried a weight that felt unusual, almost final. Louie did not fully understand the politics or history behind those words. But children often sense emotions before they understand reasons. The seriousness in those voices stayed with him long after the conversation ended. As he moved through the palace later that evening, the fragments he had overheard began forming questions inside his mind. Questions about why certain family members seemed distant. Questions about why gatherings no longer felt the same. Catherine noticed the change in him almost immediately. Mothers have a way of sensing when something is turning quietly inside their child's thoughts. As Louie joined the family that evening, she saw the unusual stillness in his expression. Normally energetic and playful, he seemed more thoughtful now, watching the adults carefully as if searching for clues in their reactions. Catherine understood that look. It was the look of a child trying to connect pieces of a puzzle no one had explained to him. William noticed it too, though he said nothing at first. The future king had spent the day navigating difficult conversations, and the weight of those discussions had not fully left his mind. But when he saw Louie studying him with that quiet seriousness, he sensed the inevitable truth approaching. Children rarely stay silent when their curiosity grows strong enough. For several minutes, Louie remained quiet, listening as his parents spoke about ordinary things. Yet the question forming inside him refused to disappear. Each passing moment only strengthened his need to understand what he had heard earlier. Finally, unable to keep the thought inside any longer, he looked directly at his father. His voice carried no accusation, no drama, only the pure honesty of a child searching for clarity. But the words he spoke carried the emotional weight of everything unfolding inside the royal family. Because sometimes the most powerful questions come from those who do not yet understand the full consequences of asking them. And when Louie finally spoke, the innocence behind his curiosity collided directly with the complicated truth the adults had been trying to navigate in silence. But Louie's question did more than break the silence. It forced the truth into the open. Sometimes history shifts not with speeches or declarations, but with a single word spoken in a quiet room. When Prince Louie asked his father whether Camilla would ever return to their lives, time seemed to pause. The future king understood the weight of the moment, and when he finally answered, the silence that followed spoke louder than anything else. For William, the question carried far more meaning than a child could possibly realize. In that instant, he was not only a father responding to his son, he was also the future king confronting a truth that had been slowly unfolding within the royal family for months. The temptation to soften the answer crossed his mind briefly. Royal tradition often depended on careful phrasing, on answers designed to protect both family and reputation. Yet William knew something else in that moment as well. Children understand more than adults often admit. And Louie, standing there with quiet seriousness in his eyes, deserved something stronger than vague reassurance. Catherine sensed the emotional weight immediately. She remained silent, but her attention never left William or Louie. She understood that this was not merely a casual question. It was the moment when the tension that had been building behind palace walls finally reached the next generation. In many ways, Catherine had anticipated that moment long before it arrived. She had watched the shifting dynamics inside the family, the subtle distance forming in conversations and gatherings. She knew the questions would eventually reach their children. William took a breath, steady and measured. The responsibility pressing on him in that instant was not political. It was deeply personal. As a father, he wanted to protect his children from the complexities of royal life. But as someone who had grown up inside those same complexities, he also knew the danger of silence. The royal family had long relied on quiet avoidance when emotions grew difficult. Yet that approach had often created more confusion than clarity. Louie waited patiently, though the tension in the room had grown unmistakable. For a child known for his playful energy, the seriousness of this moment felt unusual. His question had not been dramatic or confrontational. It had simply been honest. And that honesty now hung between father and son, demanding an answer. Finally, William spoke. Yes. The word was calm, almost gentle, yet its meaning landed heavily within the room. For Louis, the answer brought a sudden realization that something permanent had shifted. His expression changed, not with anger or sadness, but with the quiet confusion of a child beginning to understand that family relationships sometimes change in ways that cannot easily be explained. Catherine stepped slightly closer, her presence steady and reassuring. She did not interrupt William, but her silent support filled the space where uncertainty might have grown. She knew that William had chosen honesty not out of coldness, but out of respect for their children's ability to sense the truth. The silence that followed stretched longer than anyone expected. In that quiet moment, the significance of William's answer settled across the room like an invisible weight. No arguments followed. No dramatic reactions broke the stillness. Instead, there was a shared understanding forming slowly between them. Because William's answer was not only about Camilla, it represented something deeper, a boundary quietly drawn within the royal family, a shift in relationships that would influence the future of the monarchy itself. Louis had asked the question as a child seeking clarity, but the response carried implications far beyond the walls of that room. William understood that better than anyone. The choice he had made was calm and measured, yet it marked a turning point that could not easily be reversed. The family dynamic had changed, and even the youngest member of the household had now witnessed the moment when that change became real. Yet what the public would soon discover was that this moment had roots far deeper than anyone imagined. To the world outside the palace gates, the royal family always appeared united. Carefully staged appearances, perfectly timed smiles, and polite traditions created the illusion of harmony. But inside the monarchy's most private rooms, a different story had been unfolding, one filled with old wounds, shifting power, and decisions that would redefine the royal legacy. For generations, the monarchy had mastered the art of presenting calm, even when turbulence existed beneath the surface. Public ceremonies displayed unity, but history had long proven that royal families often carried tensions invisible to the outside world. The palace had always been a place where personal relationships and institutional duty collided in complicated ways. And within those walls, emotions rarely disappeared. They simply lingered quietly, shaping the choices made behind closed doors. Long before the moment when Louis asked his father that innocent but piercing question, the royal household had already been navigating a maze of unresolved feelings. Some of those tensions stretched back years, rooted in memories that never completely faded. Family dynamics inside the monarchy carried extraordinary pressure, because every personal disagreement risked becoming a symbol of something larger. When conflicts developed, they did not remain private for long. They became reflections of tradition, authority, and the future direction of the crown. Among the most significant forces shaping these tensions were the different visions held by older and younger generations within the royal family. For those who had spent decades inside the system, the monarchy represented continuity above all else. Tradition carried authority, and preserving established structures often felt like the safest path forward. But William belonged to a generation shaped by different experiences, different expectations, and a deeper awareness of how public perception could reshape the institution itself. As the future king, William stood directly at the center of that generational crossroads. Every decision he made carried implications not only for his family, but for the monarchy's survival in a rapidly changing world. The role demanded diplomacy, patience, and sometimes uncomfortable honesty. Yet the emotional weight of those responsibilities rarely appeared in public appearances. The quiet moments behind palace doors were where the real struggle unfolded. Catherine understood that struggle more clearly than most. Though she had adapted gracefully to royal life, she never forgot what it meant to approach the institution from outside its traditions. That perspective allowed her to see the royal family not only as a symbol, but as a group of individuals, whose relationships deeply influenced the environment in which their children would grow up. Protecting the next generation had quietly become one of her strongest priorities, and that priority often guided the discussions she shared privately with William. Those conversations gradually shaped the path William began following. The monarchy needed stability, but stability could not exist if emotional tensions continued influencing the household's internal balance. Slowly, almost invisibly, adjustments began taking place. Invitations shifted. Conversations became more deliberate. Certain relationships grew more distant without ever becoming openly confrontational. Within the palace, these changes unfolded with quiet precision. No official declarations announced them, no dramatic confrontations marked the moment they began. Instead, the shift developed gradually, guided by a careful awareness of how delicate royal relationships could be. The monarchy had survived centuries of transformation precisely because it adapted when necessary. Yet even the most careful adjustments carry consequences. As the distance between certain members of the family quietly increased, the internal structure of the royal household began reorganizing itself in subtle but undeniable ways. Those changes might have remained invisible forever, if not for one unexpected moment when a child's question exposed the emotional truth that had been developing behind the scenes. Because decisions made within royal walls rarely remain confined there forever. Eventually, whispers find their way beyond the palace gates. And once they do, the carefully protected image of unity becomes far more difficult to maintain, but the consequences of these choices were about to extend beyond the palace and into the public eye. To the world outside the palace gates, the royal family always appeared united. Carefully staged appearances, perfectly timed smiles, and polite traditions created the illusion of harmony. But inside the monarchy's most private rooms, a different story had been unfolding, one filled with old wounds, shifting power, and decisions that would redefine the royal legacy. For generations, the monarchy perfected a delicate performance. Calm on the surface, stability in every photograph, confidence in every speech. Yet behind those polished moments lived a far more complicated reality. Royal families, like any family bound by history and expectation, carry memories that do not disappear simply because tradition demands silence. Inside palace walls, disagreements rarely explode in public. They simmer quietly. They linger. And over time, those unspoken tensions begin shaping the direction of the entire institution. Long before Prince Louie asked his innocent but piercing question, the royal household had already been moving through a quiet storm of unresolved emotions. Some of those tensions stretched far into the past, rooted in relationships that had never fully healed. Within the monarchy, even the smallest personal conflict carries extraordinary weight. A disagreement between family members is never just private, it echoes through the traditions of the crown itself. That pressure created a complicated divide between generations inside the royal family. Those who had spent decades preserving the monarchy believed deeply in continuity. For them, tradition was not simply custom, it was protection. The system had survived wars, scandals, and public scrutiny because it resisted sudden change. Stability had always been the crown's greatest strength. But William belonged to a different generation. His life had unfolded in an era where public trust in institutions could shift overnight. He understood that the monarchy could not rely solely on tradition to secure its future. The world watching the royal family had changed, and with it came new expectations about transparency, responsibility, and leadership. Standing at the center of that transformation was William himself. As the future king, every step he took carried historical weight. His decisions were no longer personal preferences, they were signals about what the monarchy would become in the decades ahead. Balancing respect for tradition with the realities of a modern world was a challenge few people could truly understand. Catherine saw that struggle unfolding in ways others could not. Having entered royal life from outside its traditions, she possessed a rare perspective within the palace. She understood the value of the institution, yet she also understood the emotional cost that royal life could impose on a family. For her, protecting their children from the turbulence of palace politics had become a quiet but powerful priority. In private conversations far from public scrutiny, William and Catherine began discussing the boundaries they believed were necessary for their family's future. These were not dramatic confrontations or sweeping declarations. Instead, they were thoughtful, careful decisions about what kind of environment their children would grow up in, and what kind of monarchy they hoped to build. Slowly, those decisions began reshaping the internal rhythm of the palace. Invitations changed. Conversations shifted. Certain relationships became more distant, though no one announced the change openly. Within royal life, the most significant transformations often happen without fanfare. Staff members sensed it almost immediately. Advisors noticed it in William's tone during discussions. The atmosphere inside the palace subtly reorganized itself around a new understanding, one that had not been declared publicly but was unmistakably real. Yet even the most carefully managed change cannot remain invisible forever. When relationships begin to shift inside the royal family, the effects eventually ripple outward. And sometimes, the truth emerges not through official statements or palace briefings, but through the unexpected honesty of a child who asks a question no one else dares to voice. But the consequences of these choices were about to extend beyond the palace and into the public eye. When word of the family's internal shift began circulating through palace corridors, the reaction was immediate. Staff members exchanged cautious glances. Advisors whispered behind closed doors. Because if the future king had truly drawn a line regarding Camilla, it meant something far bigger than a family disagreement. It meant the monarchy itself was quietly evolving. Inside the royal household, information rarely travels through loud declarations. It moves in subtler ways. A canceled invitation here, a changed seating arrangement there. A meeting added quietly to the schedule. Palace staff are trained to notice these details, and when several of them begin to align, the message becomes impossible to ignore. Within days, aides across the palace began sensing that something inside the royal family had shifted. At first, no one spoke about it directly. The monarchy thrives on discretion, and those who serve it understand the value of silence. Yet silence does not stop curiosity. In staff corridors and private offices, small observations began connecting like pieces of a larger puzzle. A senior advisor noticed that William's tone during recent briefings had grown more decisive. Another staff member quietly remarked that certain names no longer appeared on upcoming engagement lists. None of these changes seemed dramatic on their own, but together they suggested something far more significant. The royal advisors closest to William quickly understood that this was not a temporary adjustment. When a future king begins reshaping the internal rhythm of the palace, every detail carries meaning. Behind closed doors, discussions began unfolding about what these changes might signal for the monarchy's direction. Advisors debated carefully, weighing tradition against the unmistakable reality that a new generation of leadership was emerging. For decades, palace protocol had followed patterns that rarely shifted. Relationships within the royal household were maintained with careful balance, even when tensions existed. But now that balance appeared to be moving. Certain appearances were being reorganized. Invitations to private gatherings were adjusted. Even the structure of upcoming royal engagements subtly reflected the growing influence of William and Catherine. One detail in particular caught the attention of palace insiders. The royal children George, Charlotte, and Louie were gradually becoming more central to the monarchy's public image. Their presence at key moments carried symbolic weight, quietly reinforcing the message that the future of the crown rested firmly with the next generation. Advisors understood the strategy immediately. By placing the children at the heart of the royal narrative, William and Catherine were shaping a vision of stability that looked forward rather than backward. This shift did not go unnoticed among those who had served the monarchy for many years. Some advisors recognized it as a natural evolution. Every future king eventually leaves his mark on the institution he inherits. Others, however, sensed that William's approach carried a sharper edge than expected. He was not merely preserving tradition, he was redefining which traditions would remain. That realization sparked a wave of speculation within palace circles. Conversations grew more cautious. Staff members who once spoke freely about family dynamics now measured every word. No official statement confirmed the change, yet everyone inside the palace understood that something important had already happened. Because when leadership inside the monarchy begins to transform, the shift rarely begins with a speech or a public announcement. It begins with decisions made quietly in private rooms, decisions that gradually reshape the structure of the royal household itself. And that is precisely what many palace insiders now believe they were witnessing. William's leadership style was emerging more clearly than ever before. Calm, measured, and deliberate, but unmistakably firm when it came to protecting the direction he envisioned for the monarchy's future. Yet for all the speculation unfolding within the palace, one truth remained impossible to ignore. The emotional heart of the entire story had not come from advisors, protocol changes, or royal strategy. It had come from a simple question asked by a child who had unknowingly exposed the reality unfolding behind the palace walls. And yet, while the palace struggled to adjust, one small voice had already captured the heart of the entire story. In royal history, moments of truth often come from unexpected places. Not from kings or advisors, but from the simple honesty of a child. Prince Louie didn't understand palace politics, royal strategy, or generational conflicts. All he understood was family. And in asking his question, he unknowingly exposed the truth that the monarchy had been quietly trying to hide. Inside the palace, years of careful diplomacy had shaped how difficult conversations were handled. Royal tradition often demanded restraint, silence, and patience. Conflicts were softened through polite language or hidden behind carefully structured appearances. But the question Louis asked carried none of that restraint. It arrived without calculation, without strategy, without concern for how its meaning might ripple through the institution surrounding him. It was simply the voice of a child trying to understand why the people he loved no longer seemed connected in the same way. That simplicity was precisely what made the moment so powerful. Within royal families, truth is often buried beneath layers of expectation and duty. Yet children operate differently. They observe emotions before they recognize explanations. They notice the pauses in conversation, the hesitation in someone's voice, the subtle shift in the atmosphere of a room. Louis had sensed those changes long before anyone explained them to him. His question was not born from curiosity alone. It was born from the emotional reality he had quietly felt unfolding around him. For William, that realization carried enormous weight. The future king had spent months navigating the complicated balance between tradition and personal conviction. His decisions had been thoughtful, deliberate, and deeply influenced by the lessons of his own childhood. Growing up within the monarchy had shown him how easily family tensions could become public struggles. It had also shown him the emotional cost those struggles placed on children caught in the middle. Now, standing in front of Louis, William understood something that no royal protocol could fully prepare him for. The next generation was already beginning to feel the consequences of choices made by the previous one. Protecting his children meant more than shielding them from public scrutiny. It meant ensuring that the emotional environment surrounding them remained stable, honest, and grounded in trust. Catherine understood that instinct without needing words to explain it. Throughout the moment, her quiet presence offered reassurance not only to Louis, but also to William himself. She had always believed that the strength of the royal family would ultimately depend on its ability to remain human behind the formality of the crown. Supporting William in that belief had become one of her most important roles within the palace. Together, they represented a different kind of leadership, one that placed family stability alongside royal duty. Their approach did not reject tradition, but it reinterpreted it through the lens of the future generation growing up inside those palace walls. George, Charlotte, and Louis were not just royal heirs. They were children who would one day carry the emotional legacy of the decisions being made today. And that was why Louis's question carried such symbolic power. In a single moment, it stripped away the layers of strategy that had surrounded the situation. It reminded everyone present that the monarchy was not simply an institution built on ceremony and authority. At its heart, it remained a family navigating complicated relationships under extraordinary pressure. For William, that realization reinforced the path he had already chosen. The future of the monarchy would not be defined solely by tradition. It would also be shaped by the emotional strength of the family who carried it forward. But if Louie's question revealed the truth of the present, the future of the monarchy was about to become even more dramatic. History may one day remember this moment not as a scandal or a controversy, but as a turning point. Because when Prince William quietly answered his son's question, he wasn't just responding to a child. He was signaling the beginning of a new chapter for the royal family, one that would be shaped by a different vision of loyalty, legacy, and leadership. Inside the palace, decisions rarely reveal their full importance immediately. They unfold slowly, revealing their meaning only with time. Yet those closest to the royal household understood that something fundamental had shifted the moment William chose honesty over silence. His answer had not been dramatic. It had not been delivered with authority or anger. It had been calm, deliberate, and unmistakably final. And in that calm decision lay the outline of the future monarchy he intended to build. For William, leadership had never meant simply inheriting the traditions of the crown. It meant redefining how those traditions would survive in a changing world. The monarchy had endured centuries of upheaval precisely because it adapted when the moment demanded it. And William understood that his generation carried the responsibility of guiding that adaptation once again. The quiet boundary he had drawn was not about rejecting history, it was about protecting the future. That future was already taking shape in the lives of his children. George, Charlotte, and Louie were growing up inside a royal environment very different from the one William himself had experienced as a boy. The pressures of the modern world surrounded them constantly. Every public appearance, every photograph, every whispered rumor carried the power to influence how the monarchy would be perceived by generations yet to come. William knew that protecting his children meant more than shielding them from headlines. It meant shaping the environment in which they would learn what it meant to carry the crown. At the heart of that environment stood Catherine. While William carried the weight of future kingship, Catherine quietly anchored the emotional strength of their family. Her presence within the monarchy had always balanced tradition with warmth, discipline with empathy. She understood that institutions survive not only through authority, but through human connection. In moments of tension, she provided the steadiness that allowed William to move forward with confidence. Together, they represented a partnership that many inside the palace believed would define the monarchy's next era. Their approach was not built on grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Instead, it rested on quiet strength, thoughtful choices, and an unwavering focus on the well-being of their family. Those qualities, subtle as they seemed, were gradually reshaping how the monarchy presented itself to the world. The symbolic meaning of William's decision extended far beyond a single family relationship. It represented a moment when the future king chose clarity over complexity, stability over uncertainty. For centuries, royal leadership had often relied on silence to navigate delicate situations. William's response suggested a different path, one where honesty and boundaries could coexist with tradition. For George, Charlotte, and Louie, this shift would shape the world they inherited. They were not simply royal children appearing at ceremonies or standing beside their parents during public celebrations. They were the next custodians of an institution that had survived generations of change. The choices made today would influence how they understood duty, loyalty, and family when their own time came to lead. Within palace corridors, advisors and historians alike had begun recognizing the significance of what had unfolded. Moments that appear small in the present often become defining chapters in royal history. The monarchy's story has always been shaped by quiet turning points, decisions made away from public view that later reveal themselves as the foundations of an entirely new era. What made this moment remarkable was its simplicity. No royal proclamation announced it. No ceremonial speech marked its importance. Instead, it emerged through a conversation between a father and his son, a moment of honesty that cut through years of quiet tension. That simplicity carried extraordinary power, because when history looks back at the evolution of the modern monarchy, it may not focus on grand ceremonies or political negotiations. It may focus on something far more human, a family choosing the path that would protect the next generation. And in doing so, William may have set the tone for the crown his children will one day inherit. A monarchy grounded not only in tradition but in resilience, honesty, and emotional strength. And years from now, when historians search for the moment everything changed, they may find it in the quiet voice of a young prince, asking a question no one else dared to ask. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.